Hi everyone, I'm honored to share my research here and really appreciate your attention. The first work is job characteristics, gender sorting, and gender pay gap, evidence from online job postings. This is a joint work with Qinyue from ICA. Over the last century, even though the gender gap in education level, work experience, and income has closed, there are still persistent and substantial gender differences in earnings and job types in most labor markets. However, most studies focus on the employment stage, and little is known about the degree that such differences are formed before employment. In fact, employers provide a rich set of job information in vacancy postings in today's job market. So as job seekers have different preferences for job characteristics, gender differences in jobs can start to form during the job search process and translate to differences in employment outcomes. In this paper, we use over 8 million vacancy data from one of the largest online job boards in China. We not only have rich information at rather than occupation level, but also can see the share of female applicants for each ad. We first study whether there exists gender sorting by posted wage, meaning that we investigate the correlation between the share of female applicants and posted wage. We find a persistently negative association, even controlling for detailed occupations and firms. We then ask, relative to men, why do women shy away from high-wage positions? To answer this question, we analyze textual data, define job characteristics at A level, and test major series of gender differences in labor economics such as skills and tasks, competition, and flexibility. We first find a negative correlation between the share of female applicants and the posted wage. The raw coefficient is minus 0.61, suggesting that a 10% increase in the share of female applicants for a particular position will on average signal more than 6% lower wage. After adding detailed controls, including industry, firm, occupation, and location fixed effect, we still obtain an unexplained correlation of 5%. What can explain the remaining correlation? We test major series and examine the relative importance of different job characteristics in explaining the gender wage gap by a decomposition analysis. Adding the full set of ad characteristics reduces the correlation to 2.8%, roughly 43%. 10 job skills and gender typical tasks contribute to more than 30% of the total change. Variation in job attributes including competition, travel, age requirements, and wage uncertainty explain about 50%. Education requirements lead to 4% change, and experience explain about half. This figure shows the coefficient of ad characteristics on the share of female applicants. The red bar indicates the raw estimates, only control for education and experience requirements, while the blue bar represents estimation controlling for industry, firm, and occupation and city-fixed effects. Both bars plot at the 5% significance level. Compared with the raw estimates, estimation within industry, firm, occupation, and city is more precise, indicated by the much smaller stand arrow. In terms of economic magnitude, as the fixed effects observe variation across firms and occupations, blue bars move towards the zero reference line, denoting a general smaller magnitude. There are several interesting patterns. First, listing cognitive or project management skills in ads consistently discourage women to apply for. Our results are in line with the large literature showing and explaining the underconfidence and underrepresentation of women in STEM jobs. Second, we find that women indeed tend to start into occupations or firms emphasize social and interpersonal skills. But within occupation and firm, they are inclined to apply for positions require service skills such as customer service rather than management skills like the people management skills. Third, women tend to apply for jobs require character, writing, and computer skills. Rather than technical software or programming skills, here general computer skills stand for knowledge of basic software, such as Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint. Job explicitly ask for general computer skills are really less technical, less professional, and more administrative. Fourth, we find that women tend to apply for jobs requiring phenotypical tasks, like help and care for others, document information, and take instructions. Finally, they tend to avoid male-typical tasks like operating and maintaining machines, solving problems, and making decisions. Moreover, women shy away from jobs asking for aspiration, acknowledging some extent of work expression or indicating competitive working environment. We also find women are less likely to choose jobs with time or location flexibility in the real-world setting, which is consistent with the findings of Mason Kelly's 2020 review paper. The reason is that in the real-world setting, job flexibility do not typically lead to more family-friendly outcomes, but potentially imply some less family-friendly attributes like overwork and irregular work schedules. As for working times, we find that compared with at least 8 days off per month, women are less likely to apply for jobs that do not specify day off or cannot guarantee weekends. Finally, we find that compared with a regular 8 to 9 hours per day, women are less likely to apply for ads not specifying hours or ads with more than 9 hours, and are more likely to sort into jobs with less than 8 hours. Similarly, this figure shows the coefficients of ad characteristics on log wage. We can see that returns to most skills are positive in the labor market. However, we find negative relations between character, writing, and computer skills and log wage, respectively. As mentioned before, specifying character and general computer skills is a signal of lower paying jobs. We emphasize obedience and tasks with low promotability, even though those skills themselves may be valuable in the labor market. There also is a clear pattern in terms of the return to tasks. In general, the return to female typical tasks is negative, while the return to male typical tasks is positive. As for job attributes, we find a positive correlation between each attribute and positive wage. As listing those job attributes usually demand high work intensity, long working hours, and irregular schedule. Therefore, firms compensate employees for higher salaries. For working time, probably due to the small sample of ads specifying working time, estimates here are noisy and ambiguous. And that's all for the first work I want to share. The second work is the effects of national language proficiency, evidence from Putonghua promotion programs in China. This is a joint work with Professor Lu in Tsinghua University and Hui Hua in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen. A common feature of modern society is ethnic diversity. For example, the US government officially recognized 6 racial categories, and over 500 languages are spoken in the US. Similarly, there are 56 ethnic groups living in China and speaking nearly 100 dialects. A heterogeneous society raises concerns about inequality among ethnic groups. The challenge is how to integrate such heterogeneous societies and reduce inequality. Language is a medium of communication. The command of the national language is an important determinant of both labor market performance and social outcomes. For example, language proficiency generates 5% to 35% returns in the labor market for immigrants of destination country. Moreover, language fluency also increases the likelihood of intermarriage and decreases ethnic enclave residence. In this paper, we study whether and how proficiency in the national language affects labor market outcomes, such as employment status and monthly income, and non-labor market outcomes, such as marriage market outcomes, social assimilation, and general trust. We make 4 main contributions to the literature. First, we analyze the effects of national language proficiency for the whole population instead of migrants in China. Therefore, our estimates should be closer to the population average effects of national language skills than to the effects for smaller subpopulations. Second, we use quasi-experimental variation in language proficiency, driven by 2 policies promoting the national language in China in the 1990s. Based on the variation in policy exposure across birth cohorts and the variation in language affinities between Putonghua and dialects across areas, we use the difference in regression king design method to estimate the effects of language fluency. Third, we have rich information in the data. So except labor market performance, we can study a broad set of outcomes, including spouse characteristics, social assimilation, and trust on various social groups. Fourth, we try to identify and quantify the treatment effects on labor market performance into several channels. For example, proficiency in the national language could improve education level and cognition, select to occupations involving interpersonal and communication skills, and affect migration decision and encounter discrimination. Using data from 4 waves of China family panel studies, we find that the 2 policies indeed improve national language proficiency. Specifically, if we consider 1 standard deviation change of language affinity in our sample, roughly equal to the difference between Changsha dialect and Shanghai dialect. Full exposure to the policies increases 0.17 standard deviation in language skills for students in Shanghai relative to students in Changsha. Similarly, if we compare Xiamen and Beijing, full exposure to the policies will increase about 0.8 standard deviation in language skills for students in Xiamen relative to Beijing. In terms of effect on the outcome, 1 standard deviation increase in national language proficiency raises the monthly income by 4.3% of the sample mean, increases people's socioeconomic status index by 1 standard deviation, and reduces spouse affinity index by 0.8 standard deviation. Enhance social assimilation index and trust on the general population by 0.3 and 0.2 standard deviation, respectively. This figure plots the relationship between months of birth and language proficiency. The light gray diamond plots the cohort mean of language skills in high language affinity areas, and the dark gray triangle plots the cohort mean in low language affinity areas. The blue point plots the cohort difference between the 2 groups. Lines are all fated lines. We can see that for unexposed cohorts, people in high language affinity areas have better language skills as their dialects are quite similar to 普通话. Also, the gap between the two policies is stable across different cohorts. Then, for partially exposed cohorts, people in low language affinity areas improve their language skills more quickly, and until cohorts around the second cutoff, they catch up with people in high language affinity areas. The reason is that language promotion policies have larger effects on low language affinity areas, as their local dialects are more different from 普通话, so there is more space for them to improve. Finally, for the full exposed cohort, as all cohorts have the same exposure years of the policies, there is no significant change in the difference between two areas across cohorts. This figure shows the relationship between monthly income and first cohort. We can see the gap between the low language affinity areas and high language affinity areas is stable for unexposed cohorts, increase for partially exposed cohorts, and decrease for fully exposed cohorts. If we look at the difference, we find a positive change in the slope at the first cutoff and an obvious decrease in the slope at the second kink point. Similarly, for spouse socioeconomic level, if we look at the difference, we can find a positive change in the slope at the first kink point and an obvious decrease in the slope at the second kink point. As for spouse affinity level, as we expect, people with higher language skills are able to find a more different spouse and have a larger choice set in the marriage market. So we expect that policies have negative effects on spouse affinity. So we find that for the cohort difference, there is a slope decrease at the first kink point and slope increase at the second cutoff. This figure is similar to the first stage figure. For unexposed cohorts, people in high language affinity area evaluate themselves with higher social assimilation score. Also, the gap between the two policies, the gap between the two areas is stable across different cohorts before the first cutoff. Then, for partially exposed cohorts, people in low language affinity areas improve their social assimilation, and until cohorts around the second cutoff, they catch up with people in high language affinity areas. Finally, as for general charts, we can see the difference between two areas for unexposed cohorts actually was increasing. But due to the policy effects, the difference becomes smaller and smaller for partially exposed cohorts. That's all for this video, and thanks for listening. I also look forward to talking with you on 4th October. See you.